Hi everyone and welcome back to Stellar HFY. First off, thank you. Seriously, the response to our last few tactical warfare stories has been absolutely incredible. Today we're diving into something special. This is the story of how a single human commander turned a 72-hour ultimatum into the galaxy's most expensive lesson about underestimating our species. So grab your favorite drink, hit that notification bell if you haven't already, and let's find out what happens when humanity decides that extinction is simply too expensive for our enemies to afford. Contact bearing 270, distance 12 million kilometers, and closing. The tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge silence like a blade. Commander Marcus Thorne didn't look up from his datapad, where 15 years of compiled intelligence on Veltar attack patterns scrolled past his weathered face. He'd been expecting this moment since the day he watched Centauri Prime burn from the observation deck of a rescue ship, helpless as 3 billion human souls vanished in nuclear fire. How many? Thorne's question came out steady, practiced. Around him, the bridge crew of the UES Defiant held their breath. "Sir, I'm reading." The officer's voice cracked. "Jesus Christ, sir. 300 vessels, dreadnought class and above." The datapad slipped from Thorne's fingers, clattering to the deck. 300 ships. The entire human defense fleet numbered 80 vessels, most of them outdated cruisers and patrol boats. He closed his eyes and saw Centauri again. The way the sky had turned white, then black, then nothing at all. His wife Sarah had been down there teaching xenobiology at the university. His daughter Emma, just starting her first year. They'd planned to visit for her birthday next month. "Sir, incoming transmission on all frequencies." Communications Officer Briggs looked up from his console, face pale as moonlight. It's them, sir." The main display flickered to life, revealing something that barely qualified as a face. The Veltar Supreme Commander was a fusion of biology and machinery, cables snaking from metal sockets in its skull, mandibles clicking with mechanical precision. When it spoke, the voice carried the weight of 47 conquered civilizations. "Primitive humans of the Sol System, I am Supreme Commander Zeth Galar of the Veltar Hegemony. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for integration into our empire. You have 72 hours to broadcast your unconditional surrender on all channels. Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your worlds." The transmission cut to tactical displays showing human colonies reduced to glowing craters, orbital cities torn apart like paper dolls. Statistics scrolled past, casualty counts in the billions, resistance movements crushed within hours, entire species reduced to archaeological footnotes. The message was clear: this is what happens to those who fight back. Thorne stood slowly, feeling every one of his 53 years in his joints. Around him, junior officers looked like they might vomit or faint. The weight of humanity's extinction pressed down on the bridge like a physical thing. But Marcus Thorne had been preparing for this exact moment since he'd scraped his family's ashes from the ruins of New Geneva University. "Lieutenant Chen, ship-wide communication." His voice carried 15 years of buried rage, controlled and focused like a laser cutter. "All hands, this is Commander Thorne. 30 minutes ago, the Veltar Hegemony delivered an ultimatum to our system. They want us to surrender within 72 hours. He paused, letting that sink in. In the corridors outside, he could hear boots running, voices shouting orders, the controlled chaos of a military preparing for impossible odds. "I've spent the last 15 years studying these bastards. I know their tactics, their patterns, their weaknesses. They've conquered 47 systems using the exact same playbook. Overwhelming force, psychological warfare, 72 hours of terror to break morale before the real fighting starts." His fingers tightened on the communication panel until his knuckles went white. "But there's something they don't know about humans, something they've never encountered in all their conquests." The bridge crew leaned forward unconsciously, hungry for any thread of hope. "We don't know how to quit. We don't surrender when the odds are impossible. We've spent our entire history fighting each other, and every time someone thought they had us beaten, we found a way to make them regret it." Thorne's smile was sharp as broken glass. "These alien sons of bitches think they know what they're dealing with. They're about to learn why Earth's most popular saying isn't 'we surrender,' it's 'hold my beer and watch this.'" In the depths of the ship, alarms began to sound. Not the shrill panic of an emergency, but the steady, purposeful rhythm of a plan being set in motion. Thorne had codenamed it Protocol Lazarus. Death and resurrection, defeat turned to victory through preparation and sacrifice. Admiral Rebecca Hayes appeared on the communication screen from Mars Command, her usually perfect uniform rumpled from 36 hours of nonstop coordination. Marcus, please tell me you have something. The civilian evacuations are behind schedule, and we're looking at total system collapse within 18 hours. The evacuation is proceeding exactly as planned, Admiral. Thorne's response made her eyebrows rise. The Veltar are monitoring our communications. They expect panic, chaos, desperate attempts to flee. We're giving them exactly what they want to see. Hayes leaned closer to her camera. What the hell are you talking about? Ma'am, with respect, you'll understand everything in about 71 hours and 30 minutes. Right now, I need you to trust me and maintain current operational patterns. The enemy is watching, and they need to see a defeated humanity scrambling for survival. Thorne glanced at his tactical display, where Veltar ships were maintaining their standard formation, exactly as he'd predicted. Tell me, Admiral, do you remember what I told you after the Centauri massacre? Her face darkened. That you'd find a way to make them pay? I've had 15 years to plan this moment, 15 years to study their patterns, stockpile resources, and train crews for the only kind of warfare that works against technologically superior enemies. Thorne's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. I'm going to turn their own doctrine against them. I'm going to make victory so expensive that they'll choose to find easier prey elsewhere. The countdown timer on the main display read 71 hours, 43 minutes, and 17 seconds. In that time, the Veltar expected to receive humanity's surrender broadcast. Instead, they were going to receive the most expensive education in human stubbornness that the galaxy had ever witnessed. 70 hours remaining. In the depths of Luna Base, Captain Victor Reeves ran his fingers along the hull of the modified cargo hauler, feeling the vibrations of the antimatter containment unit humming behind reinforced bulkheads. The ship had been stripped of everything non-essential. Life support reduced to a 6-hour supply, navigation systems replaced with manual controls, artificial gravity generators removed to make room for the single most destructive weapon human engineering had ever produced. You know this is a one-way trip, right? Chief Engineer Kowalski emerged from beneath the engine housing, grease-stained coveralls marking him as one of the few people who still worked with their hands in an age of automated manufacturing. These containment fields weren't designed for combat maneuvering. One hard turn and we'll all become very brief stars. Victor pulled his helmet over close-cropped gray hair, remembering another helmet, another mission, 15 years ago on Centauri Prime. He'd been a mining foreman then, teaching his 8-year-old daughter Rachel how to identify ore deposits in asteroid samples. The Veltar bombardment had caught him in orbit, loading refined materials onto transport ships while his family waited on the planet's surface. By the time the nuclear fire cleared, there hadn't been enough left of New Geneva to fill a coffee cup. Chief, I've been dead for 15 years. This is just making it official. Victor's voice carried no self-pity, only the flat certainty of a man who'd already mourned his own death. Besides, Commander Thorne didn't pick us for our survival skills. He picked us because we're the only humans crazy enough to manually pilot antimatter warheads into alien dreadnoughts. Around them, 49 other volunteers performed final checks on identical vessels. Each pilot carried the same story: families lost to Veltar, aggression, lives reduced to waiting for revenge, skills perfectly suited for humanity's most desperate gambit. They weren't heroes or martyrs. They were weapons that happened to think. Reeves, report to the briefing room. The intercom crackled with Commander Thorne's voice, carrying undertones of exhaustion and buried grief that Victor recognized like looking in a mirror. The briefing room held 50 chairs arranged in perfect rows, facing a holographic display of the solar system. Red dots marked Veltar ship positions, maintaining the same formation they'd used in 47 previous conquests. Blue lines showed projected flight paths, timing calculations, and probability matrices that made Victor's stomach clench. The mathematics of sacrifice reduced to percentages and acceptable losses. Ladies and gentlemen, You're looking at Operation Broken Arrow, Phase 1. Thorne's pointer highlighted the asteroid belt, where automated mining platforms had been working around the clock for the past 6 months. At 1400 hours, we begin the largest mining operation in human history. 6 billion tons of rock, accelerated to 0.07 light speed, targeted at precisely calculated coordinates. Captain Devon Cross raised her hand from the back row. The former Special Forces operative had been running Black Ops missions against Veltar supply lines for 3 years, ever since her unit got butchered on Kepler 442. Sir, those impact vectors don't correspond to current enemy positions. Exactly right, Captain. We're not aiming where they are. We're aiming where they'll be when they react to our asteroid bombardment by adjusting to defensive formation Gamma 7. Thorne's smile was predatory. The Veltar have used the same tactical responses for 2 centuries. When faced with kinetic bombardment, they always shift to defensive formation Gamma 7. Always. The display zoomed in on Luna Base, revealing modifications that had been taking place in secret for over a decade. What appeared to be standard cargo launch systems were actually military-grade mass drivers, capable of accelerating payloads to devastating velocities. Victor felt a chill of understanding creep up his spine. The asteroid bombardment is a feint, a very expensive, very convincing feint that will position the enemy fleet exactly where we need them for Phase 2. Thorne's voice carried the weight of calculated murder. Your antimatter charges aren't designed to destroy their ships outright. They're designed to disable command and control systems, create chaos in their formation, and provide targeting data for Phase 3. Devon Cross stood up, her scarred face showing the kind of professional interest that came from years of planning impossible missions. Sir, what's Phase 3? Phase 3 is why we've been secretly relocating Earth's population for the past 18 months. The holographic display shifted to show vast underground complexes, tunnel networks, stretching across continents, automated systems maintaining the illusion of normal surface activity. While the Veltar think they're bombing cities full of terrified civilians, they'll actually be destroying empty buildings and holographic projections. Victor felt something twist in his chest. Not fear, but a recognition of just how far humanity was willing to go to survive. Commander, you're talking about turning the entire planet into a military installation. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Captain. We can't outfight them with conventional weapons. We can't outrun them with our technology. But we can outlast them with our stubbornness, and we can make victory cost more than they're willing to pay. Thorne's eyes swept across the assembled pilots, seeing not people but guided missiles with human intelligence. The Veltar have conquered 47 civilizations because those civilizations fought like civilizations. We're going to fight like what we really are, a species of persistence predators who've spent our entire evolutionary history chasing things until they died of exhaustion. The briefing room fell silent except for the hum of air recyclers and the distant vibration of antimatter containment systems. Victor looked around at his fellow pilots, seeing his own mixture of grief and determination reflected in their faces. They weren't saving humanity. That job belonged to the engineers and planners and civilians who'd already been moved to safety. Their job was simpler and more final. Their job was to hurt the enemy so badly that the rest of the galaxy would think twice before testing human resolve. One more thing, Thorne's voice cut through Victor's thoughts. The Veltar monitor all our communications. For the next 68 hours, you'll be watching news broadcasts of panicking civilians, government officials demanding surrender, and military units appearing to fall apart under pressure. None of it is real. It's all theater, designed to make the enemy overconfident and careless. Victor nodded, understanding. The greatest weapon humanity possessed wasn't antimatter, or mass drivers, or underground cities. It was the ability to convince their enemies that victory would be easy, right up until the moment it became impossible. This is our final warning. Leave our system now, or face the consequences of underestimating a cornered species. Thorne's voice echoed across every frequency in the solar system, broadcast simultaneously from military installations, civilian stations, and deep space relay buoys. He stood alone on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the Veltar fleet maintain their textbook formation 12 million kilometers away. The response came within minutes. Supreme Commander Zethkalar's synthesized laughter filled the communication channel, a sound like grinding metal that made every human listener's teeth ache. Your desperation amuses us, Primitive. We have heard these same words from 47 species. They all believed themselves special. They all became statistics. Thorne smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut steel. Timer shows 15 seconds to Phase 1 initiation. All mining platforms report ready for synchronized detonation. In the asteroid belt, 6 months of careful preparation reached its culmination. Automated platforms that had been disguised as routine mining operations suddenly revealed their true purpose. Massive charges, each containing enough explosive force to vaporize a small moon, detonated simultaneously across a 3 million kilometer spread. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Billions of tons of rock accelerated to 7% of light speed, creating a debris field that registered on every sensor in the system. Contact! Multiple kinetic impactors inbound. The Veltar tactical officer's voice carried the first note of uncertainty they'd shown since arriving. Estimated impact in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Victor Reeves felt the acceleration press him into his pilot seat as his stripped-down cargo hauler shot through Luna's shadow, using the moon's bulk to mask his thermal signature. Around him, 49 other modified vessels flew in perfect formation, their antimatter payloads humming with barely contained energy. His daughter Rachel's picture was taped to the instrument panel, her 8-year-old smile frozen in time from their last day together on Centauri Prime. All units, this is Broken Arrow Leader. Victor's voice was steady despite the knowledge that he'd be dead within the next 10 minutes. Asteroid bombardment has triggered enemy formation shift to Gamma 7, exactly as predicted. Target acquisition in 30 seconds. The Veltar fleet moved with mechanical precision, their ships sliding into defensive positions that had successfully deflected kinetic attacks for 2 centuries. What they didn't see coming was 50 human pilots who'd been studying those exact defensive patterns for 3 years, plotting approach vectors that exploited the 1-second gaps in their overlapping fields of fire. Supreme Commander Zethkalar watched the tactical display with growing irritation as the asteroid bombardment scattered harmlessly against his fleet's energy shields. The primitive kinetic attack was exactly what he'd expected from a species facing extinction. Desperate, poorly coordinated, strategically meaningless. His tactical computers had already calculated impact trajectories and adjusted shield harmonics to deflect the incoming debris. Sir, detecting small craft approaching from lunar shadow, the tactical officer's mandibles clicked with mechanical nervousness. 50 vessels, chemical propulsion, minimal energy signatures. Ignore them. Cargo haulers fleeing the system. Begin bombardment of primary population centers on the 3rd planet. These humans need to understand the price of resistance. Zethkalar's order carried the weight of absolute authority, backed by the successful conquest of 47 civilizations. Victor Reeves armed his antimatter charge as the Veltar command ship grew larger in his viewport. The vessel was beautiful in its alien geometry, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that caught starlight like a jewel. He thought about Rachel, who would have been fascinated by the ship's design. She'd wanted to be a xenobiologist like her mother, studying alien life with the same wonder she'd shown for asteroid minerals. 20 seconds to impact, all units. It's been an honor flying with you magnificent bastards. Victor's hands moved across the manual controls with practiced precision, making tiny course corrections that would put his ship directly into the command vessel's communication array. Tell them we were here. Tell them we mattered. The first antimatter charge detonated against the Veltar flagship's shields in a burst of pure energy that lit up space like a newborn star. For 3 seconds, the ship's defensive systems held against forces equivalent to a strategic nuclear warhead. Then the containment field collapsed, and 50,000 tons of alien engineering simply ceased to exist. Zethkalar felt his command ship die around him, bulkheads buckling as atmosphere vented into space. Emergency systems screamed warnings in 3 different alien languages, while his tactical computers tried frantically to process what had just happened. The energy readings were impossible. No known species used antimatter as a tactical weapon. The delivery method was even more incomprehensible. Manual guidance systems. chemical propulsion, suicide attacks using cargo haulers. Sir, we're reading total systems failure across 7 command vessels. His tactical officer's voice cracked with something approaching panic. The humans, they're piloting those ships manually, direct kinetic impact with antimatter payloads. The Supreme Commander's mechanical augmentations sparked as he processed this information. In 2 centuries of conquest, no species had ever used suicide attacks against Veltar forces. The tactical computers had no algorithms for predicting or countering such behavior. How do you defend against an enemy willing to die to inflict damage? All ships implement immediate retaliation protocol. Begin orbital bombardment of the third planet's population centers. Maximum yield. Zethkalar's order came through gritted teeth and damaged vocal processors. If these primitives want to die, we will accommodate them. The surviving Veltar ships turned their planet-cracking weapons on Earth's major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, each metropolis vanished in nuclear fire as the aliens vented their rage and confusion on what they believed were helpless civilian populations. The bombardment continued for 6 hours, turning Earth's surface into a hellscape of radioactive craters and burning ruins. It wasn't until the radiation cleared that Zethkalar realized something was terribly wrong. The casualty reports made no sense. Cities with populations in the millions showed death tolls in the dozens. Massive urban centers registered as completely empty. The electromagnetic signatures that should have indicated billions of terrified humans simply weren't there. Tactical analysis complete, sir. The officer's voice was barely a whisper. The bombardment sites, they're showing signs of automated systems, holographic projections, and structural facades with no interior architecture. Sir, I don't think there was anyone down there. Supreme Commander Zethkalar stared at the tactical display showing empty craters where Earth's greatest cities had been, understanding for the first time that they weren't fighting a civilization. They were fighting something else entirely, something that had anticipated this exact moment and turned it into another layer of deception. Sir, we've been monitoring Veltar communications for the past 4 hours. Communications Officer Briggs looked up from his console, his face showing the kind of grim satisfaction that comes from watching an enemy realize they've been outmaneuvered. They're trying to figure out where all the bodies went. Commander Thorne nodded, watching the tactical display where Veltar ships moved in increasingly frantic search patterns over Earth's devastated surface. The aliens had expected to break human morale with their orbital bombardment. Instead, they destroyed empty movie sets while humanity's real population remained safely buried 3 kilometers underground, watching the show on closed-circuit monitors. Phase 2 is now active, Commander. The voice belonged to Captain Devon Cross, broadcasting from somewhere in the Veltar fleet formation. Resistance cells are in position and ready for boarding operations. Devon had been dead for 6 hours according to Veltar sensors, her assault shuttle destroyed during the initial antimatter attack. In reality, she'd used the explosion's electromagnetic pulse to mask her ship's thermal signature, drifting through the alien formation like a piece of debris while her team prepared for the kind of warfare humans had been perfecting since the Stone Age, close-quarters combat with improvised weapons. Remember, people, we're not trying to capture their ships. Devon's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent 3 years studying Veltar vessel architecture from salvaged wreckage. We're trying to hurt them badly enough that they'll make mistakes. Use the plasma cutters on their power distribution nodes, hit life support systems with the fusion welders, make them choose between fighting us and keeping their ships running. Supreme Commander Zethkalar stood in the ruins of his command center, trying to understand reports that made no tactical sense. Human boarding parties were somehow inside 17 of his ships, using what appeared to be construction equipment to systematically destroy critical systems. The energy signatures were all wrong. These weren't military weapons, but industrial tools repurposed for combat. Sir, the boarding parties are using thermal lances to cut through our armor plating, reported his chief engineer, a creature that was more machine than biology after centuries of cybernetic enhancement. They're accessing our ships through cargo bays and maintenance shafts, areas we never considered tactically relevant. Zethkalar's mandibles clicked with mechanical frustration. The Veltar had designed their vessels to withstand military assault, particle beams, plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes. They'd never considered defending against humans with mining equipment who treated starship hulls like asteroid ore to be excavated. Devon Cross crawled through a Veltar ventilation shaft, her plasma cutter leaving glowing scars in the alien metal as she made her way toward the ship's main power core. Behind her, Sergeant Martinez dragged a fusion welder, a tool designed for joining starship hulls that could melt through most known materials like butter through warm bread. The Veltar had built their ships to be impregnable fortresses. They hadn't built them to withstand humans who treated them like construction sites. Team 2, what's your status on the bridge assault? Devon's whisper carried through the comm system, barely audible over the sound of alien emergency klaxons. We've got 8 Veltar crew members barricaded in their command center, came the reply from Corporal Johnson. They're not shooting at us anymore. I think they're trying to figure out what we're doing to their ship. What they were doing was systematically dismantling 2 centuries of alien engineering with tools from a hardware store. The Veltar had never encountered an enemy that would rather destroy a perfectly good starship than leave it operational. Every human boarding team carried enough explosive charges to scuttle their target vessel rather than let it fall back into enemy hands. Devon, this is Thorn. How long until you reach the power core? The commander's voice carried urgency backed by tactical necessity. We need those ships disabled before Zethkalar figures out what we're really doing down here. Devon could see the power core through the ventilation grating, a beautiful piece of alien technology that converted matter directly to energy, surrounded by safety systems that had taken the Veltar 3 centuries to perfect. She pulled the plasma cutter from her belt, feeling its familiar weight. On Kepler 442, she'd used the same tool to cut through collapsed mine shafts, searching for survivors after Veltar bombardments. Today, she was going to use it to turn alien engineering into expensive scrap metal. 30 seconds, Commander. Tell the fleet to brace for fireworks. Supreme Commander Zeth Kalar watched in growing horror as 17 of his vessels reported catastrophic system failures. The human boarding parties weren't trying to capture anything. They were methodically destroying every ship they touched, using industrial equipment to reduce advanced technology to broken components. It was vandalism on a scale that defied military logic. Sir, I'm receiving reports of similar attacks on ships throughout the fleet, his tactical officer reported. The humans aren't following any recognizable combat doctrine. They're treating our vessels like mining sites. The realization hit Zeth Kalar like a physical blow. These weren't military boarding actions. They were demolition operations carried out by people who specialized in tearing things apart. The humans had studied Veltar ship design not to capture their technology, but to identify the most efficient ways to destroy it. All ships implement orbital mechanics protocol immediately. Zeth Kalar's order carried the desperation of a commander who'd lost control of the battlefield. Begin tractor beam array formation around the 3rd planet's satellite. If we cannot break their will through conventional bombardment, we will demonstrate the true cost of resistance. The surviving Veltar ships moved into position around Earth's moon, their massive tractor beam generators preparing to tear Luna from its orbit and hurl it at the planet below. It was a tactic they'd used on 17 rebellious worlds, orbital mechanics warfare that would devastate Earth through tidal forces and kinetic impacts, making the planet uninhabitable for centuries. What Zeth Kalar didn't know was that Luna Base had been waiting for exactly this formation for 40 years. Hidden beneath the moon's surface, mass driver systems originally designed for cargo launches had been converted into the largest kinetic weapons platform in human space. Commander Thorn had been counting on alien desperation to drive them into the one tactical position where Earth's hidden defenses could function with maximum effectiveness. Devon, recall all boarding teams immediately. Thorn's voice carried the finality of a man about to play his last card. Phase 3 is now active. Luna Base, prepare for Operation Broken Arrow final sequence. In the depths of the moon, automated systems began spinning up weapons that would either save humanity or destroy everything they'd fought to protect. The Veltar had positioned themselves perfectly for mankind's most desperate gambit, turning Earth's own satellite into a weapon of mass destruction. Final firing solution achieved. Enemy formation locked in predictable pattern. Execute Operation Broken Arrow on my mark. Thorne's voice carried across Luna Base's command center, where 43 men and women sat at targeting consoles that would be their tomb. The base shuddered as Veltar tractor beams began pulling at the moon's mass, gravitational distortions rippling through the rock like an earthquake in slow motion. Lieutenant Sarah Kim wiped sweat from her forehead as she manually adjusted targeting coordinates, her hands shaking not from fear, but from the massive gravitational forces trying to tear Luna apart. The automated systems had failed 12 minutes ago, overwhelmed by the same tractor beam distortions that were slowly ripping the moon from its orbit. Everything now depended on human eyes, human reflexes, and human stubbornness in the face of certain death. "Sir, I'm reading massive structural stress throughout the base," reported Chief Engineer Vasquez, his voice barely audible over the grinding of metal and rock. "Hull integrity is at 40% and falling. The moon's core is starting to shift." Thorne nodded, watching the tactical display where 217 Veltar ships held perfect formation around Luna. Supreme Commander Zeth Kalar had positioned his fleet exactly where 40 years of planning had predicted he would. Close enough for maximum tractor beam efficiency, spread out enough to avoid mutual interference, concentrated enough to present a single, massive target for weapons they didn't know existed. "Targeting teams, report status." Thorne's command cut through the chaos as another section of the base collapsed, venting atmosphere into the lunar vacuum. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off entire sections filled with personnel who would never see Earth again. "Team Alpha has firing solution on enemy command cluster." Kim's voice was steady despite the knowledge that she'd be dead in less than 5 minutes. "Gravitational distortions are affecting trajectory calculations, but we can compensate with manual adjustments." Supreme Commander Zeth Galar stood on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship, watching Earth's moon slowly tear itself apart under his fleet's tractor beams. The sight filled him with savage satisfaction. This was how you dealt with species that refused to acknowledge reality. In 6 hours, Luna would impact Earth's surface at 27 kilometers per second, creating an extinction event that would make the dinosaur killer look like a firecracker. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the satellite structure," his tactical officer reported. "The readings are unusual. It appears to be concentrated in industrial facilities rather than military installations." Zeth Kalar's mandibles clicked with mechanical irritation. Even in their final moments, the humans insisted on making no sense. Industrial facilities on a moon being torn from orbit? Probably some primitive attempt to maintain life support systems during the death spiral. It didn't matter. Nothing could survive what was coming. Deep in Luna's core, power plants that had supplied energy to mining operations for 4 decades began running far beyond their design specifications. Chief Engineer Vasquez manually overrode every safety system, pushing fusion reactors toward critical overload while directing their output to the mass driver systems hidden throughout the moon's structure. The math was brutal but simple. Luna Base had enough power to fire once at maximum capacity, and the explosion would crack the moon like an eggshell. "Sir, power levels are approaching critical threshold," Vasquez reported, his hands dancing across controls that were never meant to handle such energy loads. "All safety interlocks are disabled. We're looking at total reactor cascade failure in approximately 90 seconds. Thorne watched the targeting display where his people made final adjustments to weapons that existed only because humanity had spent centuries learning how to throw rocks at their enemies with mathematical precision. The mass drivers weren't elegant or sophisticated. They were enormous electromagnetic coils that could accelerate chunks of lunar rock to significant fractions of light speed. Combined with the gravitational chaos created by Veltar tractor beams, they would turn Luna's death into the enemy's destruction. "All teams, prepare for synchronized firing sequence," Thorne announced, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's final gambit. "On my mark, we're going to show these bastards what happens when you pick a fight with persistence predators." Lieutenant Kim felt tears freeze on her cheeks as atmosphere leaked through stress fractures in the base's hull. Her targeting console showed perfect firing solutions on 17 enemy command vessels, the ships containing the senior officers, tactical computers, and communication arrays that held the Veltar fleet together. Her finger hovered over the firing button, waiting for Thorne's final order. Execute Operation Broken Arrow. Fire all batteries. The mass drivers discharged simultaneously, hurling millions of tons of lunar rock at velocities that turned simple stone into weapons of mass destruction. The electromagnetic pulse created by overloading every power plant on Luna traveled at light speed, arriving at the Veltar fleet 3 seconds before the kinetic projectiles. Alien shields designed to deflect energy weapons offered no protection against chunks of moon moving at 12% of light speed. Supreme Commander Zeth Galar had exactly enough time to understand what was happening before his flagship ceased to exist. The electromagnetic pulse had overloaded every Veltar system simultaneously, leaving their ships blind and defenseless as Luna's remains arrived with the force of directed meteorites. Command vessels vanished in bursts of superheated plasma, while smaller ships were torn apart by debris fields that spread across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Luna Base died as its moon cracked apart, but Thorne and his people had exactly enough time to watch their targeting solutions connect with enemy ships. Through the chaos of gravitational collapse and structural failure, they saw the Veltar fleet transform from an instrument of conquest into scattered wreckage, drifting through space like metallic snow. The electromagnetic pulse had a secondary effect that no one had calculated. It created a resonance cascade in the Veltar fleet's remaining tractor beam generators, turning their own weapons into sources of gravitational chaos that prevented coordinated movement. Ships that had survived the initial bombardment found themselves trapped in gravitational eddies, their engines unable to compensate for forces that changed direction every few seconds. Commander Marcus Thorne died watching the enemy fleet tear itself apart, Luna's destruction creating a debris field that would make the Sol system dangerous to navigate for the next century. His final transmission to Mars Command contained no heroic speeches or dramatic last words, just precise tactical data about enemy casualties and strategic recommendations for dealing with survivors. Human resistance exceeds acceptable loss parameters. Species classified as Pyrrhic capable. Recommend avoidance protocols. The transmission from Supreme Commander Zeth Galar's dying ship reached Veltar High Command 3 hours after Luna's destruction, carried by an automated beacon that had somehow survived the electromagnetic cascade. It was the first time in Veltar history that a conquest fleet had recommended retreat rather than reinforcement. Captain Devon Cross stood in the cargo bay of a captured Veltar cruiser, watching as her engineering teams systematically dismantled alien technology that had taken centuries to develop. The ship's surviving crew, 17 beings who looked like a fusion of insect and machine, sat in restraints that had been welded together from mining equipment. Their mechanical augmentations sparked occasionally, damaged by the same electromagnetic pulse that had crippled their fleet. The interrogation protocols are working exactly as Commander Thorne predicted, Devon reported to Admiral Hayes on Mars Command. These bastards are so used to winning that they literally don't know how to handle defeat. They're giving us tactical intelligence faster than we can process it. The information flowing from captured Veltar personnel painted a picture of an empire built on the assumption that conquest would always be profitable. Their expansion patterns, fleet compositions, supply lines, and command structures, everything designed around the certainty that overwhelming technological superiority would minimize losses while maximizing territorial gains. No one in the hegemony had ever calculated the cost of victory against an enemy willing to destroy themselves to inflict damage. Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence reports streaming in from 17 captured vessels, her face showing the kind of grim satisfaction that comes from watching a bully realize they've picked the wrong victim. Devon, what's the assessment on their strategic capabilities? Are we looking at reinforcements? Ma'am, based on what we're learning, the Veltar operate on profit margins. They conquered 47 systems because each conquest generated more resources than it cost. We just demonstrated that fighting humanity requires accepting losses that make victory economically impossible. Devon gestured toward the alien prisoners, whose mechanical augmentations continued sparking with system failures. These aren't soldiers. They're accountants with weapons, and we just broke their business model. The wreckage of Luna had become humanity's most effective defense system, not through design but through unintended consequences. The debris field stretched across Earth's orbital plane, creating a navigation hazard that forced all approaching vessels into predictable flight paths. Mars Command had spent 6 months installing weapons platforms at the Lagrange points, turning Luna's remains into a funnel that channeled potential invaders directly into humanity's crosshairs. Dr. James Patterson, the xenobiologist studying captured Veltar technology, made daily reports that read like economic analyses rather than military assessments. The hegemony's expansion model requires each conquest to pay for itself within 3 standard years. Based on our casualty infliction rates, any attempt to subjugate humanity would require a minimum investment of 1,200 vessels over 15 years, with projected losses exceeding 70%. The mathematics simply don't support continued aggression. The psychological impact of Luna's destruction rippled across the galaxy faster than the light-speed communications carrying news of humanity's victory. 3 separate alien civilizations, the Keth Collective, the Zarian Trade Federation, and the Crystalline Hegemony, had independently reached the same conclusion within 18 months of the battle. Humanity wasn't militarily superior, but they had demonstrated something far more dangerous: the willingness to accept mutual destruction rather than surrender. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council, representing a species that had earned its seat not through technological advancement or peaceful expansion, but through proving they were too dangerous to ignore. The council chambers, carved from a single asteroid and housing representatives from 43 different civilizations, had never hosted a species with humanity's reputation. The question before this council is simple, Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying across translation systems that rendered her words in dozens of alien languages. Do you want to trade with us, or do you want to find out what happens when humans decide you're a threat to our survival? The Veltar representative, one of only 3 survivors from Zethkalar's command staff, activated his translation implant with mechanical precision. The hegemony formally withdraws all territorial claims in human space. We recommend that other species do the same. Within 5 years, human space had become surrounded by a buffer zone that no alien civilization would cross. Not because humanity had conquered territory through military expansion, but because every species in the local cluster had independently calculated that the cost of fighting humans exceeded any possible benefit. Trade missions were welcome. Diplomatic exchanges were encouraged. Military expeditions were considered economic suicide. Captain Cross, now Admiral Cross, stood on the observation deck of Mars Command, watching cargo ships from a dozen different worlds dock at humanity's newest trade station. The aliens came not as conquerors or overlords, but as cautious business partners who understood that humans represented the galaxy's most profitable customers and its most dangerous enemies. Admiral, we're receiving another request from the Andromedans, her aide reported. They want to establish a trade agreement for rare earth minerals. Standard terms. They provide raw materials. We provide protection from anyone stupid enough to threaten their shipping lanes. Cross smiled, remembering Victor Reeves and his daughter's fascination with alien geology, remembering Commander Thorne's final transmission about making victory too expensive for their enemies. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had won a war by losing it so spectacularly that no one wanted to fight them again. The Luna Memorial stood where Earth's moon had once orbited, a simple monument broadcasting a message in every known language. Here died 43 humans who chose extinction over surrender. Their sacrifice made our species too expensive to exterminate. Below that, in smaller text, was Commander Thorne's final tactical assessment. Victory is not about defeating your enemies. Victory is about making them choose easier targets. The galaxy had learned humanity's lesson well. In the 15 years since Luna's destruction, no alien civilization had launched a military expedition against human space. Not because they couldn't win, but because winning would cost more than losing. Marcus Thorne had turned humanity's greatest weakness, their stubborn refusal to quit, into their most effective weapon. The species that had once faced extinction was now the one that other civilizations paid to avoid fighting. The war was over. Humanity had won by proving that some victories are too expensive to achieve. If Commander Thorne's final gambit gave you chills, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because humanity's greatest victories are just getting started. Now we want to hear from you. If you were planning humanity's defense against a superior alien force, what would be your too expensive to conquer strategy? Would you weaponize our infrastructure like Thorne did? Or do you have an even more brutal psychological warfare tactic in mind? Drop your battle plans in the comments below. We read every single one, and the best strategies might just inspire our next story.